Tell me, if I were to give you the power to change the world against everyone else's will, would you do it? Or would you hesitate? And if you did hesitate, what would that mean for the power that you would then hold? What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here from that Atonement, have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Welcome back. Here we are to do a breakdown and review of chapter 22 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. And I am very, very excited to talk about chapter 22, Pathway of Souls. This chapter, as I kind of expected, considering we probably only have about 2 chapters left, is very thick. And by thick, I mean thick with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 C's thick, because there's a lot to address. Ultimately, due to the nature of the conflict that was set up at the end of last chapter, the nature of the overarching conflict of not just Modulo, but also the original series, and, you know, like, the series before the original series, aka Zero, and just the nature of Curse Energy as a whole, as a system. Like, there is a lot to be taken care of in this chapter, and thusly it is filled to the brim with a lot of interesting character interactions, interesting character dynamics, interesting character conflicts, some hints of scaling here and there. It is a lot. So let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into chapter 22, Pathway of Souls. But before that, if you want to check out the 32-minute live reaction, it'll be linked in the description. Well, no, it won't be linked in the description down below, but the Patreon will be linked in the description down below, where you can watch it for $1 a month, or in all previous reactions and whatever remaining reactions there are to Modulo or any possible future JJ content. On top of that, you can just become a member, and you will also be able to get immediate access to the live reaction here, along with all previous live reactions, all future live reactions. But in terms of the chapter itself, we open up with YUJI essentially laying out the groundwork for the scenario, just in case you may have forgotten. Or if not necessarily forgotten, weren't able to piece together, as it wasn't necessarily laid out clearly before this point. As it goes, I get the gist of what you want to do and how you want to do it. You want to use the spaceship's mole, Kosu's cursed energy to boost this one's cursed technique, which can manipulate souls. Then, you'll adjust the forms of the Japanese souls, so the cursed spirits aren't born from them. But, can you really do it? So, this is the ultimatum, right? One way or another, the main end goal is to eradicate and annihilate all cursed spirits. The current conflict of the narrative, is the idea of the handling of cursed spirits between Remelians and humanity. Humanity thinks cursed spirits are bad, evil, dumb, stupid, so they want to wipe them all out. Or if not wipe them all out, at least keep them manageable by wiping out some of them. Meanwhile, the Remelians would maybe possibly have been okay with that if they didn't feel like Kallians didn't have similar effects to Kallians upon their death. And on top of that, if, you know, maybe Carlson shot. But all that aside, the main conflict is focused around that. And on top of that, we do need to remember that a lot of the original series, while it does become, you know, sorcerer versus sorcerer towards the back, I say back half. Like, obviously, curses do make appearances here and there, thanks to Kenjaku and heck, even Kurushi and Sendai. And, you know, the curses in... Technically, Cursia. Cursia is a curse, and also... Actually, curses do appear in, like, literally almost every one of the colonies. I think the only colonies that curses aren't, like, actively part of the main colony fight are, ironically, not the first 2 in Isidori and Megami. There are no curses involved in those respective fights. It's all techniques. But, with it being the case, curses do take a more so back seat in JJK's narrative, but we have to remember the main job of Jujutsu Sorcerers that has been the main job since Jujutsu Sorcerers and Jujutsu Sorcerers, taking care of cursed spirits. So, by addressing the problem at the root, right, eliminating the possibility for cursed spirits to be born at all, eventually, there will be no more cursed spirits. They will become essentially an endangered species, which would eventually be wiped out by the efforts of humans and possibly reformed Remelians. If not reformed Remelians that are more willing to, you know, execute them. Because, you know, they're not really Kallians. But, with it being the case, the setup required for it is very, very interesting. Shout outs to the undeniable Yuta Akotsu glaze, as it is his cursed energy that's going to be used to do all this. And it is just his stored up cursed energy. Now, of course, we don't know how much Rika spent when she was fused with Tsurugi. And also don't know how much was actually stored in there, but still, it's a very impressive feat that Yuta's cursed energy alone, whether it's stored over decades, if Mar was right about that assumption or not, is enough that it could wipe everything, essentially, and fundamentally power a technique to change the entire nation. Remember, Kenjaku used L Transfiguration after using Uzumaki with Mahito, but that was only to awaken, like, a set amount of sorcerers that he had specifically prepared beforehand, and a set amount of incarnated vessels. That was pretty much it. It was essentially a wide start to a certain subset of people. They're trying to change all of Japan. And considering Japan's population now, upwards of 50 years before the current narrative, Japan's population, let me see, Japan's population is experiencing rapid decline. Ooh, whoops, with an estimated 122.9 to 123.9 million residents as of early 2026. So, obviously, even assuming, let's say the decline stopped, or we can even say it went on for a few more decades, right? Let's say they're just at 100 million people. That's way more than Mahito or even Kenjaku ever affected without transfiguration. So the fact that Yuta Kotsu's cursed energy can fuel that much, or at least act as a basis for that fuel, impressive. Second, of course, we know the mole, the spaceship's mole, is optimizing the cursed energy super high quality, super next level in order to do this as well. So I know it's working with the Kotsu's cursed energy, but still, even if a Kotsu's cursed energy is only taking care of 1 million people, and then it is the rest of the mole doing the 100 times amplification, still very impressive for a Kotsu's cursed energy to act as such a strong basis for Mahito's ability. Then naturally Mahito's ability to manipulate the soul does play into, you know, what we've known of the original series, and specifically how it was used to do the opposite. Remember, Kenjaku, where Yuki believed the way to progress for humanity was breaking away from cursed energy, Kenjaku was all about optimizing cursed energy. So using Mahito's ability in reverse is an interesting twist on that, especially considering it'd be done by Yuji himself, the child of Kenjaku, the person who wanted to optimize cursed energy. Very interesting to see. And we naturally see Yuji, while understanding the plan, it's pretty clearly laid out to him, and it's clearly laid out to Maru. He's like, are you sure you can do it? Because once again, we have to remember, Yuji doesn't know Maru. Yuji has maybe like, thanks to Toto, I guess, somehow, maybe has like 25% of the context. If we're lowballing it, highballing, he's like 50-50 on the context of everything here. And especially on Maru, you will see later on this chapter, he doesn't even know Maru's name. So he's like, sure, this all sounds nice and reasonable, but is it actually possible? And Maru, seemingly enough, using the, I don't want to call it plot power, because I've kind of rationalized it. And we'll get into my rationalization for Maru and his utilization of the narrative and his curse technique and this, that, and the third soon enough. But Maru essentially says, if you'll allow it. So, essentially with Yuji filling in the role as humanity's representative, it still needs to be like a handshake between two people, but still, Maru can do it. He's quite confident in his ability to wield all these factors, even if they drastically transcend him in certain ways, thanks to his curse technique. But we see that with such a fact being the case, Yuji's like, fine, all right, if you can do it, we can do it. But just so you know, this guy's not really the obedience type. And naturally, Maru, seemingly having a deep understanding of Mahito thanks to his curse technique again, is like, obviously, he'll need to be subdued. And before we get into the subjugation or subduing, let me take a sip. Stay hydrated, folks. But with being the case, Maru being so willing to subdue Mahito is very interesting. I think this plays into a general idea, and I'll talk about it again more in terms of like what they're planning to do does to the future of Rumelian culture and obviously to society. But very specifically, I think Maru's willingness to subjugate Mahito, despite knowing what Mahito is as a cursed spirit, and probably having extra reverence for him as a cursed spirit that can literally communicate and is in a humanoid form, it's clear that Maru has sort of transcended his ideals of being a warrior, right? Obviously, he was bound by them for the longest time. We see that in how he treats the battle with Tsurugi, and how even all the way to the end, he swings true until, Tsurugi literally collapses after he gave him the fight. But now Maru, after that battle, he is broken free from those shackles. He doesn't have any reverence for Mahito. He understands that Mahito is just another piece of a cog of a broken system that needs to be entirely annihilated. And thus he's like, yeah, sure, he needs to be subdued. And in fact, he'll even go on to say something even more hype. As we see Mahito still sitting on the ground, being very, very horrified at the fact that, oh no, I haven't done any training. I've been sitting here stalling so I could respawn after he despawned. What do you mean he never despawned? But naturally, we see Yuji go, don't threaten me with a good time. Subdue him, huh? And naturally, Maru drops kind of a bar as he goes, want me to do it? Which I mean, not unreasonable. We gotta remember that Maru at full power was pretty much dead even. Like, obviously you could argue Surika had a bit of an advantage, but was dead even with Surika. And we know that, at least in terms of base stats, even with an incomplete heavenly restriction, Tsurugi should be stronger than his grandpa was at Tsurugi's same age? Yeah, because I believe Yuta is 17 in main JJK. So at the same age, his base should be stronger, and then he gets the same infinite curse energy buff and reinforcement buff that Yuta got. So Maru being on the level of a special grade sorcerer, easily capable of subjugating Mahito, and to the point where he just genuinely asks you, hey, you want me to do it? I can take care of it. It does make sense of the scaling presented so far, but it is just crazy to see and really cool to see Maru just be like, yeah, you know this major antagonist from the original series? I can diff him. I've got that second narrative power creep, dog. I'm built like that. And we see Yuji go, no, I can do it. I'm just worried I might accidentally kill him. Which I do like that. Once again, there's this consistent idea, very specifically. There's an overarching idea. The idea that I almost said Ryumen Itadori. Look, the idea that Itadori Yuji has sort of taken the two strongest archetypes he actually had any sort of dynamic with, and has kind of fused them together and has embodying them as a unified concept, right? He has taken aspects of Satoru Gojo. You can even see this by how typically his eyes are covered by what appears to be like a black band, almost as if he's blindfolded, you know, like Satoru Gojo. Just like appearance-wise, he takes out the Satoru Gojo. But even in terms of his mentality, there is this idea that Yuji is so much stronger than everything else now that he almost can't differentiate between those beneath him. And we know that Sukuna had that problem a lot, where sometimes he just go too hard. He's like, oh, whoops, didn't mean to do that, or I didn't, despite being an apex and master of control, just like Yuji likely is at this point, they still have those moments of like, oh, I could go too hard and accidentally do too much. And that's a very Sukuna style thing to say. Yuji is his great uncle in that way. And obviously in his physical presentation, and even in some of his physical mannerisms and words that he says later on, we'll see he embodies Satoru Gojo. So it is nice to see that given form here in the idea that Yuji's like, no, I could do it, but I'll probably accidentally boom him. And then he just wants to clarify with Maru, can't use him if we get rid of him, right? Which is still very, very nice, right? Especially with Yuji sort of like disconnecting from his humanity a whole lot, seemingly in Modulo. It's great to see that he still has very, very strong emotions towards what Mahito did. Of course, what Mahito did happened decades ago. And realistically, for all intents and purposes, outside of Nanami, everyone that Mahito affected that was directly in Yuji's life is still alive. AKA Toto, then Nobara. Well, also Junpei. But who cares about Junpei? I'm kidding. But like, well, actually, no, I'm not kidding. Who cares about Junpei? But that aside, Toto and Nobara lived, but still, Yuji has that animosity, has that vitriol, because it's only human for him to. He hated Mahito, and that didn't change over the years. But with it being the case, Maru explains, oh, you're worried about annihilating him? Well, don't worry. This is the roll credits, Pathway to Souls. No one except us has physical forms. Battle here doesn't end in death, but in defeat and enslavement. So wreak all the havoc you want. So that's interesting, right? Because Maru and Yuji are sort of here as like they're almost, how do I put this? They're like guests rather than actual permanent residents. They have physical forms. They can interact typically. They can use all their power. But a being like Mahito, who's been stuck here, couldn't interact with anything like that. But at the same time, it does grant him a quote-unquote pseudo-immortality where they don't have to worry about really, worrying about exercising him. Because there is no real Mahito to exercise. The soul of Mahito, the pure essence of him, is still here and will seemingly always be here. But we see that Yuji, naturally, given this fact, and like, oh, okay, I can do whatever I want to. You sure about that? He squats down right next to Mahito and essentially levels with him for a second here, as Mahito still is clearly in shock. And he goes, "Did you hear that? You win, or what?" Which is hilarious. It is very much akin to the Jogo. Like I've said, Yuji compares a lot to the strongest previously, but this instant right here, where he essentially gives Mahito an ultimatum of like, so you want to fight back or want me to subjugate you? it reminds me a lot of Sukuna in Shibuya, where he's talking to Joko, where he's like, so, what are you going to do? Huh? You gonna run my fade? And try to get something off, or you're just going to die, bro? And ultimately, Joko just died, while admittedly getting to annihilate a whole bunch. Same thing for Mahito here, where he doesn't really have a choice in the matter. Yuji's asking him, you in or what? Essentially as a taunt. To be like, you gonna fight back at all? You gonna make this nice and easy for me? You want to spread it open right now? I can rip your guts wide open if I really feel like it. If you fight back a little bit, it could be fun for the both of us. So you win or what? That sort of confidence and ability to do this to Mahito. Chef's kiss. Beautiful. Another thing I do want to mention about Mahito real quick, I love how his hair is colored here. There's no, like, distinct outline lines here. It's just his white hair against whatever is surrounding him. You can even see how it bleeds directly into Yuji's white here, because there's no, like, guidelines or what's the word I'm looking for? Outlines blocking out the hair. This pure white, which then fades is into this white. Very, very nice. It's half done here, where it's like some of it is pure white going into the void, and then some of it does actually have outlines. But regardless, cool stuff to see here. And naturally, Mahito, who was in shell shock, realizing that, oh, he's going to spread me. And he's going to stick his foot so far up in me, it's going to come out my mouth. Well, in that case, I might as well fight back anyway. And he lunges at Yuji. Or at least attempts to. He swings at Yuji, and Yuji skips back. Once again, just like his great uncle, completely weaving Mahito's entire attack, as Mars simply stands on the sidelines. He's not going to involve in the battle, or engage in the battle. Yuji's going to handle it. He obviously knows that Yuji can handle it, so he's just going to watch. And we see this action of Mahito essentially tears down the veneer of the Pathway to Souls. We do know that the astral realm is really funky and weird and does a whole bunch of strange out there things, so it's not too surprising to see this quote-unquote set, the stage be set, quote-unquote, as Mahito tears away at the seemingly fabric of this reality and poses up, still looking a little bummy, as he says, "Quit running your darn mouth like you already won." Mahito, oh Mahito. Oh, Mahito, if only you knew. But with it being the case, Mahito does try to go for the aura here, as Yuji recognizes, oh, it's Shibuya. And I do think it's a very particular reason why it is Shibuya. We have to remember where Mahito died, right? While it's clear he seemingly had some sort of reflection upon the general grander narrative. In fact, I can even, let me see. I'll even see if I can go pull up the panel wannel. But oh, I gotta keep this panel here for reference sake. But let me go here. Is it here? I think it is. I think it's legit. I think it's legit here. Yeah. Okay. But we do know that Mahito is kind of like disconnected from the world. In fact, the last we see him in 271, he is in this same spot where they come and find him. But because this is the Pathway to Souls, he's actually pretty disconnected from the rest of the world. He doesn't have any observance of what's going on in there. It's why he wasn't sure if Yuji was alive at first or gone. And he even recognizes, "Sukuna, you got here first, huh?" And this whole dynamic of Mahito being left behind from the entire world is made clear again. Why is Mahito manifesting Shibuya? Because it's the last thing he remembers. Mahito has been in a state of pure stasis. He hasn't progressed. He hasn't developed. He hasn't changed. He died. Lived and died. Well, not lived. He also, because he's been around more places in Japan. But the last thing Mahito remembers is Shibuya. The final battle where he himself proclaimed this is maybe the last chance we have to curse each other. There is nothing greater for Mahito. There is nothing further beyond, because he is, by his very nature, as a curse, a stagnant creature. So, Yuji recognizes it as Shibuya, and Mahito goes manipulated, because that's literally all he has. He is nothing. Nothing anymore. Not to a being who got to keep on living. Even though Yuji Todori, in many ways, like Mahito, has not changed, he still has grown. He still has developed. But Mahito does take advantage of the fact that he's in the Pathway of Souls, and that this manifestation is something of his own making, as he touches the ground, and the earth begins to rise between Yuji Todori's feet, getting a double exclamation mark from him. The most emotion Mahito will get out of Yuji, visibly, that we'll see this entire chapter. As Mahito ecstatically says, "If you've both got a physical form here, then you'll die when I kill you. I'm the one who's going to be wreaking havoc." Which, for all intents and purposes, I don't blame Mahito for. Yes, of course, when you die, you are killed. But in this context, I get why Mahito believes he's essentially indestructible, right? He can't die. If he needs to be forcefully subjugated, he needs to be forcefully subjugated. And obviously, Yuji's not going to be able to do that to him. Yuji's not built like that. Come on now. Mahito has no information on what's happened with Yuji. And he looks exactly the same. So he can't be that much stronger, despite the terror of him still being alive all these years later, looking exactly the same. So Mahito begins to wile out. He uses Idol Transfiguration on the very world itself that they exist in, and multiple. This is interesting. I wonder if there's any specific symbolism behind, like, this type of fish. Like, is it an anglerfish? Like the way these fish look. But it's almost like if this is meant to be an anglerfish with no angler. That's the only thing that's confusing about it. It is interesting that, like, these are false lights, things that could devour and contain Yuji Todori, because Mahito has steeped himself in a false light. He's not actually comp here at all. But we see the multiple different beasts made of the, like, stone souls of this false Shibuya all converge in on Yuji as he's risen up on the platform, and he's essentially thrown up into the air for an idol transfiguration Chibaku Tensei. The stones all collapse in on Yuji, and Mahito hits a devious lat spread, bro. Like, if you got that Mahito back, shout out to you, dog. This man has gains that are immaculate. I thought it was just his, like, ultimate form. No, even base Mahito has some it has amazing back gains. But idol transfiguration tears into, collapses in on Yuji, and it does seem to generally seem like Mahito does have a chance here, right? I mean, obviously, sure, he probably didn't get any stronger any faster. He doesn't have any knowledge on Yuji, but Yuji's a bum, right? There's no way Yuji could deal with idol transfiguration if he actually got his soul touched anymore. He doesn't have Sukuna guarding him anymore. Yuji doesn't have the strongest soul in this series. Come on now. Mahito's gonna wipe him. In fact, we see Mahito immediately realize his advantage and push it as hard as he can. Not just attacking Yuji with the buildings and the countless weird fish-like structures that he's using. He goes, "This entire place is built from matter almost identical to the soul itself. That means I can target everything here with my curse technique. Let's see how young you look when I'm through with you!" And he immediately goes to activate his domain expansion. Notably, though, it is interesting. I feel like this is the first time we've seen him do, like, the twin hand signs, 2 from the mouth and 2 from the hands. Usually he always does, like, the 4 in his mouth. But he's so desperate here, and he's so geeked and freaking out to finally have a chance to slaughter Yuji Todori, to get his lick back after all these years. He goes for his domain expansion to instantly transfigure Yuji Todori's soul, and... Wait a minute. Do-ain XP Scion? Cian? Shun? What's that splat doing there in the middle? Oh, I wonder. Mahito's tongue, arms and all, sliced. His fingers slashed off. No domain for Mahito. And seemingly enough, this damage is permanent, as Mahito is unable to recover it immediately. And is very confused as he goes, blood pouring from his orifices, or curse blood. We know it's like purple. But actually, no, I think Mahito actually does bleed red blood in the anime. But still, he's bleeding out, and then he obviously is very confused. Because once again, he hasn't had any link to the world. He doesn't know that Yuji has just a little itty bit of growing. And as he looks up in terror, he then finds out the hard way that Yuji Itadori, the, 15-year-old boy he fought in this same Shibuya, but the real one, all those years ago, yeah, that boy, he's gone. And he's been gone for a long time now, as Mahito looks on to bear witness to the strongest sorcerer of today, of the future, Yuji Itadori, who, without even having his hands leave his pockets, instantaneously cleaves. Or roll. No, I think, honestly, this is Dismantles, because he's not touching anything with his hands. So, he spontaneously net dismantles everything around him, tearing through the entirety of the false Shibuya, chunking all of it. And not just all of the Shibuya, well, not all of it, because also there's buildings intact behind them. But Mahito himself gets cut to ribbons. You see his hair gets slashed multiple places, his dome gets slashed multiple places, his whole upper torso gets cut off, his shoulder caps get cut off, his hands, his legs, they all get pieced apart as he's literally blown back by presumably an outward expanding circular spear of dismantles. Yuji took no damage, his clothes took no damage. It was something light. Now I know you may be wondering, I wonder if anyone else could do this. Here's 15 Finger, aka clearly not at full power and holding back Sukuna. Also, even finer dicing an individual with hands in pockets. He grabs the phone, though. But specifically, he doesn't actually even direct the dismantle here. He also absolutely cubes Mimiko. I think this is Mimiko? No, this is Nanako. He absolutely cubes Nanako here with no issue at all. Hands in pockets and all. So Yuji Itadori, like I mentioned, really is his great uncle in a variety of ways. And this is one of them. He has completely mastered Shrine, essentially. The only thing we don't know, and especially considering there is no threat for Yuji to use it on at this point, the thing I doubt we'll see, we don't know if Yuji has open barrier domain. And I know a lot of people, in fact, after doing the live reaction, I took a little peek on the general discourse. A lot of people have Yuji as top one in the verse already. Like, oh, he's the strongest there is. I think until we get an open barrier domain expansion, I still think Sukuna would beat him. I know people are going to be like, what? No, that doesn't make any sense. But I think what's very important to remember are two things. One, we never saw Sukuna go all out in his true body. Or just in general, realistically, we never got to see him use Shrine to its full capacity, because by the time he was able to use Shrine to its full capacity, he was very, very heavily weakened and brain damaged. And of course, even with the full body refresh, he's still heavily brain damaged and sandbagging and very capricious, so he never even goes all out against our Jujutsu crew. The closest we get to that is the Dismantle that he throws at Kashimo, and even then, that's still a nerf from what Sukuna's full output would have been. So, if you're wondering, do I think Sukuna could have done this exact same thing? Absolutely. I think what Gege is using Yuji for is to essentially show us the full potential of Shrine that Sukuna never utilized for a variety of reasons in the original narrative, from his own character, to active nerfs, to drops in output that Yuji and other characters provided. Like, I think this is just meant to be what Sukuna could have done, especially considering we see little passive examples of him doing this whole cubing thing here, and he even does it later against Higuruma, where he like fine cubes a piece of rubble, but not Higuruma himself. So clearly, I think Sukuna is still more than capable of this, and I'm still heavily debating Yuji versus Sukuna. Honestly, as cool and as impressive as Yuji's blood manipulation is, it wouldn't work against Sukuna. Sukuna is immune to poisons and toxins, and on top of that, Shrine for Shrine, if they're going domain for domain, Sukuna's domain is going to win every time. Even if Yuji unlocks a small Bulbasaur, unless he has open barrier domain, then Sukuna's going to win in the domain clash. Plus he has the curse tools to make up for the missing extra curse technique from No 10 Shadows and Yuji having blood manipulation, and blood manipulation wouldn't work. I'm still in the camp, even with the crazy next level upscale this is. If this is physical form Yuji absolutely dogging Mahito here, it still is Mahito. It still is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. Well, not really small. The buildings are being cut apart, but still, I think Sukuna can do it. You can call me Huffing Copium. That's kind of how I see it. But with it being the case, we see that Mahito gets absolutely violated and annihilated. But notably, Yuji doesn't let him go just yet, or that easily, as he fine slices his dome into multiple pieces. And naturally, Yuji walks up and is like, darn, were you always this weak? And this is where another example of Sukuna. Well, hold on. Let me take a sip. Whew, stay hydrated, folks. Jesus, that was refreshing. Oh, that was refreshing. Oh, that was refreshing. But, that being the case, Yuji walks up and asks, were you always this weak? Which does, once again, remind me of his great uncle. Hold on, let me pull it out. Check on his great uncle. Where is Joko, my boy? Let me see. Here it is. But yeah, the idea of degrading what is still a very powerful cursed spirit and calling them weak, very akin to Ryo and Sukuna. But you know who else it is very akin to on the same curse, ironically? Let me see if I can go quickly find it. It's Satsuru Gojo. If you'll remember, he when facing Jogo, who is actually pretty commonly agreed to be a pretty powerful cursed spirit, in the face of Jogo and his presence, he simply says, you're kind of weak. And that's what Yuji does here. A very similar reference to both of his examples for himself, essentially. The previous examples of the strongest that Yuji Todori has learned from, he embodies here and now. Hold on, let me see if I can get the quote just so I can show it directly. You're kind of weak. Tap tap. Gojo Sensei. He doesn't plan on telling me. A little lesson, do your thing, it won't be a liability to you. We should be good. Yeah, once again, the idea of Gojo mocking Jogo and being shocked at how weak he is. Same thing with Yuji Todori being shocked about how weak Mahito was. Because obviously the big idea is that Mahito hasn't changed. Yuji has had a bunch of time to develop, refine himself, evolve in terms of curse energy pool, manipulation, status, all that. And of course he's gotten multiple curse techniques in comparison to when he fought Mahito, where he had a whole setup. But Mahito stayed the same. Sure, he had a whole realm to himself that he could control freely, but what does that matter if his output's still the same? If his speed is still the same? If his endurance is still the same? He ultimately was dedicated or destined to be this fodder. And Yuji's just surprised. It's just like, you gotta think about it from Yuji's perspective. Last he fought Mahito properly, Mahito was a true viable threat. No Todo, no Nobara interference, Yuji was losing to that Mahito. And obviously Sukuna wasn't gonna help him there either. So he probably had this image of Mahito in his head for the longest, even if he had long since surpassed it, as, you know, Mahito, he's a big, bad, dangerous, viable threat. And now he's realizing, darn, if you're this fodder, how far was I? It's like an awakening moment. It's kind of like, for anyone who has played a video game as a child, remember struggling super duper intensely on a certain boss, and then going back later and be like, oh, what? I was struggling with this? Me? Huh. It is strange, but it happens all the time. Like, what's a good example for me? A good example, Bakugan, one of my favorite games of all time. I mean this occasionally. It's either, it's Kingdom Hearts, it's Pokemon Black and White, and or this one, Bakugan Battle Brawler, specifically for the DS. I remember the final boss, or not even the final boss. There's just a game in there. Like they're little mini games that you do on the DS bottom screen in order to win the certain games. And one of the games I just never understood. I never could get it right, even when I had a stylus. When I was a kid, when I first got the game, it was like the spinning game where you had to spin the block around. It's why one of my cards that I kept all the way to the end of the game, I never really changed it, was just the scratch battle. I'd always change it to scratch battle where I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I could do that aggressively even as a kid, and I could usually win. That's how I beat the game as a kid. But then I went back as an adult because I replay the game like either every year or every other year, like fully replay 100% complete. It's a very quick game, and I still love it. Right, it's still one of my favorite games of all time. But now as I'm an adult, I don't ever have to change the battle system, except for I still don't like the tapping thing where I have to time the taps. I'm still bad at that. But that was one of those scenarios where I believe the final boss of the game, one of their main Bakugan, it does the spinning thing. And now, even though I don't have a stylus, if I don't feel like using it, I can do it so much easier now. But I had this conception of it being big, bad, hard, and dangerous in my youth, but now it's not. Same thing for YUJI and Mahito. Mahito was a big bad threat, but he stayed the same. He stagnated. But YUJI, he grew up. He evolved. He got better. And he simply swipes Mahito's brain out, or at least the section of Mahito that they need, his eyes. And we see, after he's split, Maru, who's been standing by and watching, returns the world to Void and goes, sorry, but we're going to use you now. And I think that is a lingering aspect, right, of Maru's respect for cursed spirits, as they are faux Kallions. And obviously Mahito is an exceptional cursed spirit, even if ultimately he is pretty weak. It's the idea of the transcendence of culture, yet still the respect for it, which I think is a good place for Maru to, if he's going to end the narrative this way. We still have presumably 2 more chapters, but if he's going to end the narrative this way, this is a good balancing point to have him at, where he obviously respects his culture, but he's no longer being shackled by it. And that's the idea of him giving respects and even apologizing to Mahito for using him, essentially. But we see that Mahito instantly turn, or at least the pieces of Mahito instantly turn into light orbs and then vanish. And naturally, YUJI begins to think after having loaded Mahito, and Maru notices it and goes, what is it? And YUJI goes, it's nothing. Just a little concern that he messed with my friends who've passed on. And Maru explains, there's no need to worry. Normally souls can interfere with each other to that extent here. And naturally YUJI, who, while he's obviously studied the soul and has gained an extensive mastery over it, still doesn't know everything, is like, huh? Yeah, but that's what his curse technique does. That's what we needed him. And Maru explains this. He doesn't have that much curse energy left. He just regained his power temporarily due to the influence of my own curse technique. That's all. And this will be a twofold thing. Number one, I still love, once again, the idea of YUJI still being a human dude with emotions, stuff like that. I like that he still cares, right? He was worried for Yuta Okotsu. He was worried for Maki Zenin. He was worried for Hana Kurisu. We don't know if Bengui's alive or not, but he was worried for a lot of his friends that did die and presumably came through here just as Sukuna did, and worried that Mahito would mess with them, just as a way to get back at him. So to see him worried about that is nice. Even after loading Mahito and calling him weak, that still was something that's on his mind. Because even if he doesn't respect Mahito anymore as a proper threat, he still is the scion of souls, essentially. He was in a bad spot to do bad things to people he cared about. That's great stuff. Then, very specifically, the idea of YUJI not knowing everything is also very, very good. There's still more things he needs to learn, more things he needs to understand. He still is able to grow, right? Even if he isn't literally growing and or aging as fast as everyone else. Then, there's Maru's curse technique. Now, admittedly, I was on the record last review being like, listening to the comments, I was like, Maru's, his curse technique is really, really plot devicey. It feels super duper contrived. It does whatever the narrative needs it to do, right? And not in the way that every character does whatever the narrative needs a character to do in the moment. Like genuinely too contrived. Genuinely too contrived, a little bit too convenient, right? But then I needed to genuinely change my perspective a little bit. Ooh, sorry about that. I had to change my perspective a little bit on chaos and harmony as a curse technique, and very specifically Maru as a character. Because I think, and look at it like this. For the longest time, a little headcanon I've held, which is not necessarily directly supported by the narrative, but isn't contradicted by it either, is that Ryumen Sukuna was sort of a balance patch, right? Whoever's running the Jujutsu Kaisen server, not Gege himself, really, but like if there is an in-universe like supreme or higher entity that controls the entire system, Ryumen Sukuna was a balance patch to the Heian era. The Heian era was monstrous, but maybe needed a little bit more of a push. Ryumen Sukuna was that push. That's why he was born exceptional in every way, perfect body for sorcery, rapid growth rate, rapid understanding, deep primordial hunger, and perfectly embodied the system of Jujutsu. That's why he was born. He was a balance patch. I think in response to Ryumen Sukuna, the verse patched again by introducing the Six Eyes and the Limitless, which simply didn't exist in Sukuna's time. And then the next balance patch after that was not even the strongest Six Eyes and Limitless user in Satoru Gojo, but actually Toji Fushiguro, the sort of divine prank. While the Six Eyes were introduced to sort of balance patch, which was Ryumen Sukuna, it did sort of lock Jutsu society and the Jutsu world into a set destiny thanks to Tengen. And then Toji Fushiguro, the divine prank, the Son Wukong, if you will, the Monkey King, comes in and breaks destiny and breaks fate by coming in and destroying Tengen's next vessel, Riko Awanai, and then freeing everyone, in a way, from the binds of Tengen by opening Tengen up to curse spirit manipulation and the entire plot of original JJK with Kinjaku. Then, of course, we have the other major, strongest type balance patch, which was Satoru Gojo himself. His very existence shifted the nature of the world. His very birth is what made everyone become stronger, just as a byproduct of him existing. As the world was getting too weak, the world introduced Satoru Gojo to the meta, and then Satoru Gojo buffed the meta massively. It's why, essentially, Kinjaku says, hey, Sukuna, we're entering a new Heian era because everyone else is so much stronger thanks to the advent of Satoru Gojo, and obviously the return of everyone for the Culling Games. Then on top of that, with the idea of certain characters existing to sort of balance the universe by a higher power of some sort, obviously it's plot, but the higher power, Maru is that. Harmony and Chaos is that. You could argue Dabura is as well, because he acts as a facilitator, but specifically, I'd say for the sheer levels of convenience, and it kind of knows everything until it doesn't know everything, and it fills every role until it can't fill a role, of Harmony and Chaos, it is literally the most direct example of the universe being like, things have gotten a little stale, things are getting a little bit too weak, let's introduce a massive shakeup again. Maru is that shakeup. Cross is that shakeup. They are that variety. And that's why them bringing Samorians / Rumelians, really, the Rumelians plus 2 Deskunte, to Earth and drastically changing the system is fine and fits narratively because it goes into the idea of the Jujutsu society, the Jujutsu world, running on some sort of system. And that system occasionally needs to update itself, it needs to revamp itself, it needs to change itself, it needs to develop constantly. It's an ever-revolving door. And Maru is just a piece of that door. Even Yuji Todori ultimately is bound by the system. Ryumen Sukuna, despite being a balancer for the system, was bound by the system. Same with Satoru Gojo. Same with Kashima Hajime. Same with Tochi Fushiguro. Same with Ryu Ishigori. Same with everyone who had struggles or connections or interpretations of the strongest. Heck, even Dabura himself. All these different characters had different struggles with the system. But now Maru is the system itself, essentially being like, well, let's see what we can do. Let's change it. Now, viewing Maru from that perspective, I'm perfectly fine with this technique doing all this nonsense, because it kind of needs to, as it is the ultimate system patch. That's my new rationalization for Maru and all the insanity he gets up to. Because for his curse technique to passively restore Mahito to his prime when he has no cursed energy left, which does make sense in of itself, that's another thing I need to comment on, but that's pretty crazy. Him having all this information and control, pretty crazy. His ability to collect all these important factors into one area in this weird soul plane, even though they're living beings, and to do all this to fundamentally change the nature of sorcerers and humanity. Like, that's crazy. But technically, it all makes sense if he's meant to be a living balance patch that is active and not just one that gets dropped in. He's not like he's a system change, essentially, right? How do I put it? Yeah, I think that is the appropriate role for any of my rivals players out there. There are new character drops, which then shake up the meta, but then there's also literal system changes, new system mechanics and stuff like that is introduced or taken care of. Any of my fighting game players know what I'm talking about as well. My Guilty Gear Strive players especially, we had things like, whatchamacallit? Brain Wild Rush is just like a whole new system mechanic that was just brought in, and stuff like that happens from game to game or patch to patch, and that is the same case here with Maru. He is the system change if everyone else is but a new character drop. And specifically, Mahito not having much cursed energy left seemed to not make sense to me at first, but it does make sense in the context of he is stuck at that point of his death. He was cycled. And he was cycled at the near end of his life when he needed to be saved anyway. He never had time to regenerate cursed energy, as cursed energy didn't generate in the Pathway to Souls. That all makes sense. But, moving forward from that, we see that Yuji goes, you really know everything, huh? And Maru explains, no, I only know it because we're in this place. And this place is seemingly like a cross between the Pathway to Souls, something to do with that Kallion from last chapter, and also Harmony and Chaos. Maru is, once again, acting as a living system admin, essentially. He is, that's the joke I want to make, but I won't. But he is truly altering the system at its core. And we see that as they walk into this weird esoteric room in the Pathway Between Souls, they reach this point. And we see a little cart, all the tools being contained. A Mahito doll, essentially, idol transfiguration given physical form. The ring, which obviously contains Yuta Kotsu's cursed energy. And the secret soul book of Yuki Sakumo, who did all the research on human souls and cursed energy and how that works. And the mole. Essentially, presumably, like a living representation of the spaceship. I don't think he just took some tiny pieces of mole. I think this is presumably a representation, manifestation of the entire spaceship. Then, of course, we get to see that Maru, while he knows a lot, he just wants to clarify a few things as they sit in this weird astral room that sort of transcends everything. For my Maki fans out there, this is the Sacred Palace. If you know what that means, you know what that means. You know what that means. This is literally you know who and you know who in the Sacred Palace changing things. That's what they're doing. Literally. This is just the Sacred Palace. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if I looked through Gege's like inspirations and they're like, Magi, I can see it. But if you don't know what that means, read Magi. It's peak. But that aside, we see that Maru goes, I just want some final confirmation about the Earth Kallions, the cursed spirits. And then Yuji goes on to explain. Once again, you can see how he's resembling Gojo with the whole idea that the black caused by his hoodie comes over his face. Specifically over his eyes like a blindfold. But we see, Yuji explains, cursed spirits are formed from an accumulation of cursed energy that leaks out of humans. And this is the important detail here, right? Note how Yuji doesn't say the Japanese. He says humans. Humans. And that's the important point, right? We have to remember, everyone in the JJK universe, even if they don't realize it, has some measure of cursed energy. The Japanese have an exceptional amount, presumably thanks to Tengen's barrier, but we do know that cursed energy is a phenomenon that affects things worldwide. If you'll remember, Satoru Gojo went overseas consistently to deal with things. Why would that matter if he, didn't have things that were worldwide that need to be taken care of? Remember, Miguel. I think also LaRue is like European, but Miguel, essentially. He also is a sorcerer from Africa, from a lineage of sorcerers who created the entire black robe, which was made by sorcerers of sorcerers by imbuing cursed energy into a robe. And he specifically mentions generations. Cursed energy is a planetary thing. It's not just a Japanese thing. And we know this is universal for seemingly the entire Jujutsu world, where sentient life exists, because of the Samorians. Remember, it isn't just Remelians who have Royoroka, aka cursed energy, it is also all Samorians. And as Kunte, like Dabura, have cursed energy. In fact, they fight with it. They reinforce themselves with Royoroka. So, it is a universal thing that the cursed energy leaks out of humans in general. So their ideas that they're going to propose aren't actually perfect. But we see that Yuji explains, and this phenomenon occurs almost exclusively in Japan. But note his wording here. Almost exclusively in Japan, not actually exclusively. It is not just the Japanese people's fault that cursed spirits exist. But we see that Yuji brings up two options. Or, let me see. It may be Maru speaking here. I think I'll go with Maru, as he says. So, to create a world where cursed spirits are no longer born, we can eliminate cursed energy from the Japanese. Or turn the Japanese into sorcerers. Those are our only options. The logic of option 2 is that sorcerers with cursed energy... Wait, no. The logic with option 2 is that a sorcerer's cursed energy circulates within... What can I not read? The logic of option 2 is that a sorcerer's cursed energy circulates efficiently within the body, and using cursed techniques consumes the cursed energy, which would result in extremely little leakage, correct? And Yuji goes, yep. Did he already learn the contents of Zakumo's secret notebook? That's handy. Yeah, and once again, it's Chaos and Harmony. He's literally server admin in the Sacred Palace, getting ready to alter the world, so all the information that's contained within the Sacred Palace, aka this little room, is being fed directly into him. So all the information in the soul. You have to download that. Also, we're running out of time. We only have 2 chapters left, including 3, technically including this one. So yeah, of course, we couldn't really take time to have all this explained tomorrow properly. If you don't know, you don't know. But, as Yuji says, that's handy. We see Maru begin to bring up a certain concern of his. But I don't think option 2 can work. Damage caused by cursed spirits will just be replaced by damage from curse users. Oh, actually, no, I think this is UJI. I made the same mistake in the live reaction. You check it over on Patreon for those 1 month. Remember for those theaters. But we see that UJI presently says, but I don't think option 2 can work. Damage by cursed spirits will just be replaced by damage from curse users. And Maru says, and as for option 1, wouldn't we just end up creating more physically gifted people like Tsurugi? Which is a good point, right? We know, at least seemingly, the only reason why Toji and Maki and Tsurugi are the way they are is because they have 0 curse energy, right? There's no extra special stipulations. Well, seemingly not. As when Maru says, it's equally possible that people like him would be evil too. Yuji explains, yeah, but that only manifests in those born with insanely powerful innate techniques or cursed energy. So, obviously, what that is meant to imply there is that Toji was probably meant to be born with a powerful inherited technique. Possibly the 10 Shadows, with a whole bunch of curse energy actually go with it, but the whole divine prank idea, the world needing a new balance patch, maybe needing to break free of fate, if you will, gave Toji 0 curse energy at all. And remember, Toji is even rarer than the 6 Eyes and the Limitless combo, as he's the only person, as far as we know, in all of history to be born with 0 cursed energy, just flat out. He had brothers, but he didn't have to lose anything from them or have curse energy taken away by an external source, like Rika took away Tsurugi's curse energy in order to actually achieve his full potential. And Maki was a twin who needed her twin to die in order to reach her full potential. Toji was the only exclusive one, but it's possible that Toji was supposed to have the 10 Shadows, and that's why Megami inherited it instead. Maybe the same case for Tsurugi as well, but ended up getting passed down to Yuka, and he just had limited cursed energy. I don't know why, though. Once again, he was born an only child. I don't know why he just didn't end up like Toji, but that aside. And then for Maki, if either she was supposed to have dumb stupid cursed energy as she was the elder twin, plus possibly construction, or if Maki didn't exist and was all to Mai was probably supposed to be Yorozu 2.0, a whole bunch of cursed energy with construction in order to make it work. So essentially Yuji saying that the heavenly restriction users are limited by the fact that they needed to have high base potential in the first place means that erasing cursed energy wouldn't suddenly make a whole bunch of Tojis and Makis, which was a concern that a lot of people had when it came to erasing cursed energy in the first place, but it just wouldn't happen. But we then see that Maru goes, then we'll proceed with option 1, eliminating cursed energy from both Japanese and the Samorians. Is that good with you? And naturally, they didn't talk about the Samorians up to this point. As Yuji goes, wait a second, cursed spirits aren't born from Samorians in the first place, right? Which is a good and interesting point. We still don't, we know about the Kallions. We've seen the Kallion that they worship and that names them. We have more context from them than we did at the beginning, but we still don't know where they come from. We don't know if they breed to create. We don't know if they evolve from something. We don't know enough about the Kallion at all, realistically. But they seemingly are not cursed spirits. It isn't a circular cycle where the rebellions existed, their negative emotions leaked out, creating Kallions, and then they evolved from the cursed spirits that they initially were into Kallions. It just seems like the Kallions existed and then the rebellions existed and then they came together. But with it being the case, we see that Maru says, yes, but if we only eliminate cursed energy from Earthlings, it'll just create a new conflict later. Which is true. And that conflict could actually end up being very devastating, as we know that Japan is going nuclear in this timeline, so they absolutely would just annihilate all Samorians if they could, as they did not have access to a resource of power. Especially a resource of power that they've had for so long. That's been the foundation of a lot of their strength. But with it being the case, you usually go, good point. As he knows that, yeah, probably just leaving the Samorians with cursed energy wouldn't be fair. But we then see Yuji finally ask, hey, it's kind of weird to ask you this now after we've been talking for so long, but, who are you? And Maru goes, oh, sorry, I'm Marulu. My name is Marulu. And Yuji then proceeds to level with Marulu now that he's got his thing. Marulu, what are your thoughts on what we're about to do? And Maru puts his head down as he goes, for me, it's Atonement. We caused a lot of trouble for Earth. We caused lots of trouble for Earth. And, this is once again that, balance of the 50-50. Is he right? Technically? But at the same time, I think a very important thing to remember about this conflict is that it's humanity's fault. The Sumerians, mainly the Remelians, would not have fought as hard as they did in the way that they did if humanity had just been a bit more honest up front, if they had explained the nature of history, if they had been more direct about their history and their culture, right? Open, true, proper cultural exchange would have circumvented the entire plot as it is right now. Which obviously isn't necessarily the best thing. The erasure of the negative system of Jujutsu and curse energy in general is actually a good thing, narratively, and just generally, right? But still, this was all because humanity wasn't clear about the nature of cursed spirits to the Sumerians, or the Remelians specifically, even after learning about, but to be fair, they didn't know, somebody didn't know that Chaldeans would be equivalent to cursed spirits, so, but still, they weren't as clear and upfront as with everything, and even then, they could have avoided more tensions, and possibly moved forward more peacefully, if Yakamoto didn't shoot Cross, for just touching his sword, and not even attempting to do anything. That was legit just Yakimaru's fault, which led to the collapse of human-Sumerian negotiations, as one of their saviors was literally shot. Shock horror. So, obviously, Mori is technically correct. They did cause a lot of trouble for Earth, but I feel bad that the immigrant refugee allegory, if not, no, flat, he legit just is an immigrant refugee. It's like, oh, my people did a lot of bad things, even though we weren't told everything after we tried to cooperate the best we could and didn't impose our will using the super weapon that we had the entire time. Yeah, we gotta atone for what we did. It's kind of weird messaging. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, it's fine though. It's not like that's not true today. There are people who have been oppressed for centuries, literal time, since time was recorded essentially, and yet they still feel like they need to apologize for things that were done to their people, rather than anything else. Which is always read is a little bit off to me, but that is very true to form. And Maru feeling guilt based on his interaction with Tsurugi does make sense. But I don't know, man. I feel bad that the refugee who was simply trying to save his people from an oppressive regime is now being punished, or is like inflicting self-punishment essentially, by ruining the future and the culture of his entire people. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad Maru has transcended the culture enough to understand that what he's doing technically is for the greater good. But yeah, he is making a pretty big bad choice without consulting anybody outside of Yuji and himself. Which is a lot. And he's doing it because, oh, well, we Remelians need to atone for what we did, when all they did was get one of their people shot. And then ask, hey, maybe don't do the thing that's like slowly causing us brain damage. We greatly appreciate it. And of course, that is technically the unreasonable part. That is probably the part where he means for atonement. But even still, the whole curse energy, the whole curse spirit situation could have been handled so much better if Yakimaru wasn't a stone cold certified idiot. And actually knowing that Mahito had nothing to do with that, right? I read that as, oh, well, maybe Mahito was like pushing the guy to make the most illogical decision possible. No, that was just like genuine human hatred and stupidity and error. And while it is true, that has also led to massive simple human hatred, stupidity, and error has led to some of the most calamitous events in all of human history. Like, it's not, won't be the first time, probably won't even be the last. But still, man, I feel bad for, like, it's an interesting message to send. But, with it being the case, we see that Maru's goal through this atonement is, so at the very least, I want everyone to think us meeting made the world a better place. And technically, he is right. By eliminating the birth of cursed spirits, even if it does technically slaughter his culture and also his people and their ability to differentiate and stand out beyond their like slight biological differences in the third eye, he is using this connection, using this link to Yuji to make the world a better place by eliminating cursed spirits, which has been a fundamental problem that has plagued JJK seemingly since time immemorial. As long as humans have existed, cursed spirits have existed. But we see that Yuji, upon hearing this, goes, sorry. Listen, I'm not denying how you feel, and parts of it are correct, but what we're about to do is a huge sin. And this is very interesting, right? Yuji, who has probably, like, loose understanding, right? I talked about this earlier, the idea that he has, like, maybe, like, a 50-50 at most understanding of what's actually going on. It is interesting to hear him be like, I'm not denying what you're talking about, and you're kind of right, at least parts of it, but ultimately, we're still doing a very bad thing here. And I do like that Yuji's laying that out for Maru, because he is much older than Maru. He is more experienced. Maru's 19, but Yuji's what, 80 something? And obviously he's lived through a lot of like world-changing conflicts, was at the center of a good chunk of them. But he's letting Maru know the guilt that he will now have to live with for essentially slaughtering the future, right? As he lays out, in exchange for your safety, we're taking away all kinds of possibilities from the future. For example, the research into using cursed energy as a power source has been stalled. The arrival of aliens should have rapidly pushed that progress forward. Hundreds of years from now, resources might run dry, and leave cursed energy as the only option for us to rely on. But we'd be taking away that possibility. Most of all, we'd be tampering with people's body without their consent. That's nothing to be proud of. And those are two very true things, right? Ultimately, I think the future one is less. I'm very call me insane, right? Especially as a person who does ironically work for the future, right? Like the damn recording this review versus the day it's gonna go up is like 4 days apart. So anyway, I am worried about the future, worried about the future myself. But I always think it is very true to point where characters who are so delusionally focused on the future are like kind of when there's so many problems in the present, right? Like maybe the future will be better if you take care of the problems in the present. So I'm less iffy on that first point, but the second point Yuji brings up, it's the tampering with people's bodies, making this choice for everyone to fundamentally change the system and how it operates with nothing more than these two men. That is a very, very heavy, not just like a heavy choice in terms of like, oh, that has, like, it has a lot of weight to it, has a lot of girth, but also it's a heavy choice in terms of specifically doing it without talking to anybody outside of these two. It's heavy-handed in its impact, and it's heavy-handed in the implication that they will do. Like I said, Maru is essentially agreeing to slaughter his culture. All the interacts with the Kallions, like, you can't be a warrior without cursed energy, as far as we know. Without Royal Loka, you're not being a warrior anymore. That's gone. The nature of curtain's gone. The Jujutsu Society after this generation, based on how they word it, gone. Like that's the thing. They're destroying years upon years of history. Now, of course, are either the Jujutsu Society system or even the warrior system that good and or healthy cultural systems? No, not necessarily. But still, that is history that they're essentially deciding to destroy on a whim. And we see Maru begin to realize the weight of his action, what he plans to do, as he goes, wait, then what should I do? And Yuji says, despite all that, I'll do it. And he says this with shockingly enough, like a mix of a calm yet determined face. And we see that Maru's like, are you sure it's okay? And Yuji straight up admits, heck no. But I'm going to do it anyway. And this is another, I thought about it earlier, I'll bring it up again. This is another underlying truth that is true in our world too, but it's especially true in JJK. It's the idea that if you have the power to do something, not only is it your responsibility to some degree to do something with that power, but also no one can really stop you. Right? Like, obviously this is meant to be like a dual side, like a handshake agreement between Yuji and Maru. But think about how Ryomen Sukuna defined the Heian era around himself. He was being worshipped as a deity, y'all. Like that man took the world that once rejected him and made it praise him because he had the power to do so. Satoru Gojo saved Yuji Todori's life, saved Yuta Okose's life, took in the stray of the Zen and did all that. Why? Because he had the power to do so. No one could stop and or challenge Satoru Gojo. So he took it upon himself to use that power responsibly and in the way that he viewed as the way he could do it because he was the strongest. Same thing with Kashimo Hajime living the life he lived. Same thing with Ryu Shiguro with the life he lived. Even Toshi Fushiguro in the rampant gambling and burning his life away that he did. It was all because of their absolute strength. They could decide. And now Yuji Todori, the strongest human of the modern day, has the freedom, has the power to decide. Why? Because he has it. Because he's developed it. Because this is his role to play. And that's why he says, heck no, it's not okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. And naturally Maru hears this and is like, why? And Yuji says, because I think it's the right thing to do. Most of all, it seems like I'm going to live for another 300 years or so. So I want to do everything I can while I'm here. And I can accept any punishment if it comes to that. So, this is the idea of Yuji Todori as the Bodhisattva. Now, I'm not sure, hold on, in fact, to Make sure I'm not jacking that up. Bodhisattva is an enlightened being in Mahayana Buddhism who voluntarily delays entering nirvana to assist all sentient beings in achieving enlightenment, driven by boundless compassion and wisdom. They make vows to liberate others, cultivating the six perfections. Okay, so yeah, Yuji, by the end of the narrative, if you'll remember that statue, in fact, I can even quickly run and pull that up. Such as the beauty of having the Manga on the man. But let me see. Yuji, it's in what? It's in chapter 267, maybe? 267? If it's not 267, okay, it's not 267. It's probably like 265. Yeah. But like even this right here, I forget which one it is, but this is the Bodhisattva, right? The idea that he's being merciful, that he's pitying Sukuna, and that he pities the world, right? Ultimately, Yuji is delaying his nirvana, which is death, right? He's not allowing himself to be liberated because he wants everyone else to be liberated before him. And if that liberation or lack thereof comes with punishment, he's willing to take it. He is a cog in a machine, but he's going to make sure that machine runs until everyone else has run through it. And that's all up to him because he has the power to do so. And it still is based in that very human idea of what he believes is right versus what he believes is wrong. Very interesting that he's only going to live another 300 years or so. I don't know how he guessed that or knows that. It's probably just like aging slowly, but he still will eventually die, presumably. But still, he's determined to do this. And that's the idea where he goes with, I'll do everything I can while I'm here. And I can accept any punishment if it comes to that. Even if it means erasing the culture, even if it means collapsing the system, even if it means breaking everything, he's willing to do it because he views that as being right. Obviously, the system is so broken on both ends, on the warrior culture side of things, on the Disgunte culture side of things, heck, on the Jujutsu Society side of things, that it cannot be salvaged. It cannot be saved. It cannot be fixed within itself. Yuji Todori had 68 years to try and fix it. Yuta Kotsu, Maki Zen, and the heroes of the world, Akari Kinji, they all tried to fix the system, yet they could not fix it because it's fundamentally broken. It is not even if it's not fundamentally broken, it is working exactly as intended, but that intention is inherently wrong and bad, so you need to break everything down. And if something bad comes of that, Yuji Todori will take care of it. And we see that ultimately Yuji does hit a little bit of a snag as he goes, I wonder if I still won't age even without my cursed energy. Because he doesn't know like how his physiology will work, considering his physiology is heavily based on being part curse. And we see that Maru explains, we won't interfere with the souls of current Jujutsu sorcerers and Samodians. I want to limit it to non-sorcerers and people who will be born in the future. Otherwise, there will be people whose lives are suddenly changed forever because of this. And that is very true, but also it's going to be very culture shocking, right? Like, especially if they don't tell anybody. But they presumably will. But the main issue with this is that it'll really be a slow, instead of like a sudden culture shock and death and society collapse, it'll be a slow burn culture shock and society collapse. Essentially, everyone in this lifetime better live it well, because they're going to leave problems to the future that they may not be able to handle. They better slaughter every single cursed spirit, because remember, if even a single cursed spirit escapes, well, actually no, they'll still probably have cursed tools, but they won't be strong enough to probably wield them to take down a cursed spirit that's been growing for years, so they better wipe out every single cursed spirit. As Yuji says, the cursed spirits are next then. And Maru says, yeah, the cursed spirits that exist now are essentially destined to die. Like, they need to slaughter them all. Or else, they could grow stronger over the years, presumably passively, because while they can't be born anymore, that doesn't immediately eradicate all of them. Because even, like, erasing the system of cursed energy wouldn't do it all. But we see Yuji explain that, as nice as this all sounds, it's still more complicated than that. As he says, no, it's not what I mean. Even if you eliminate cursed energy from the Japanese, cursed spirits will probably still be born. He looks so much like Gojo here, man. Just minus a scar. But naturally, Maru goes, huh? And that's the end of the chapter. What I'm assuming Yuji means is the idea I've been bringing up, and the idea of his wording specifically. Cursed spirits normally only appear in Japan, but they appear worldwide too. Cursed spirits and Jujutsu sorcery normally just exist in Japan, but they exist, at least we bare minimum know, in Africa and wherever Gojo went overseas. So like, and even Yuki, I believe, is also researching stuff overseas. So genuinely, yeah, this scenario is a lot more complicated, which is why I'm very interested to see how they're going to wrap this up in just 2 chapters. However, this chapter's gas. So let me grab this. a very W chapter. Obviously, Mahito had to be handled very, very quickly, but that makes sense within the context of the original narrative. As much as I, with my Mahito stocks, would have liked Mahito to provide a much more intense and crazy and chaotic fight, like, it would have made sense for him to. His whole thing is that he's supposed to remain stagnant because he refuses to evolve by his nature as a cursed spirit. If he did evolve while YUJI evolved, while it would have been cool, it would have made sense in the narrative that was established for Mahito all the way at the end. So I'm glad that YUJI got to low diff him. I'm glad he got his rematch. I'm glad he got to show off and flex off and show the importance of human development and growth in comparison to the cursed spirit's stagnation and inability to develop. Then, on top of that, I do like the conversation here. Even if I still feel bad for, you know, Maru saying, yeah, we the refugees who were fleeing from an oppressive government, man, should really feel bad for the oppressive government who shot my brother. like we caused so much trouble for the people who, you know, instigated us and shot us. But regardless, that aside, I do like the character and emotional conflict, right? That comes from the nature of what they're about to do, the grave wrongness of it all, from fundamentally changing people without their consent, even if it is for a quote-unquote greater good, and specifically Yuji's determination to do it anyway, even in spite of the unknowns and the possibilities that he does not fully understand. That all is beautiful. The chapter itself is beautiful, and hopefully you enjoyed the review. But if you made it all the way to this review, please do me a favor and leave, is this even right? Literally, is this even right? Question mark in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure that lead to notifications so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, you're gonna have a Patreon below where you support me for as low as $1 a month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks include the 32-minute live reaction to this very chapter, ad-free variations of all my videos, early ad-free access to all my videos, early ad-free access to not all my videos on this channel, but also the videos on the second channel that got the reaction linked in the card in the upper right. And on top of that, I do have a link to my Ko-Fi in the description. Oh wait, you also get your name listed and read aloud at the end of every single video if you're a $3 member, $3 patron or higher, and if you are just any type of patron or member, $1, anything, you get your name listed at the end of every single video. And on top of that, I do have my Ko-Fi link down below where you can drop 5 beans for a short video, 20 beans for a long video, or any beans at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. And also have a link to my I also have a link to my Twitch in the description down below. That got the controller where I stream every Friday 8 p.m. ES Tizzle. Roll through if you want to have a good old time yapping with your boy. We yap, we game, we have a good old time. But now I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, J2MA, Buddha Ura, Yuki Ally, Grim, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Dino, Hector Gonzalez, Tim Thomas, Kaving, RXN, Logan Guzman, Dead Meme, Keon Stewart, Donovan McIntosh, Hamza Idrisi, BNA DNA, Edwin Ingbignoba, Straw, Atenzi Shear, Antavius Mitchell, Superflame Zero, Weary Exile, Window Life, Alex Kenny, Todd, The Practical One, Landon Clapwick, Heath Nelson, CAET, Funny Dude, Jagoda, Plant Crone, Striker Man, Brandon Payne, Black Sage, Multi-Batman Superman, The Limbs, I Metatron, Sheesh King, Joe Bean, Aswin Hey Presetia, Sleepin' John, JMD KD, The Young Family, Pastel Pandora, Sino King, NMA, Karina Hernandez, Mo City King, DKG, Andrine Bonnet, John Malcolm, Akolare Babatunde, ASD 1234, Jesse Clapp, CCC, Ramondo Furen, SkyXT, and Victor Jacobs. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: A+A, Dread Zoen, Karina Hernandez, Kevin Encarnacion, Lil Kodo, Midnight Lord 21, and Sean. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our Inc. tier members: King RTX, Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06, and Zom. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. Then I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walkie Munoz, and Ernesto 430.